chickens. It had roosts where the chickens roost. Wherever a chicken learns to roost when he's little, that's where he roosts as long as he lives. It's hard to change them, because once in a while they'll learn to fly up in a tree, and you don't want them to do that because in the wintertime they freeze. But so you have to clean the chicken house every so often. And sometimes chickens get lice on them, and you can get dusting powder and things like that that'll help for them. But the little fellows would get little tiny mites. Well, I guess they were little lice. And we didn't know what to do. We didn't have any dusting powder anymore. But we could see these on the chickens. And of course they'd scratch and everything. And my grandmother was visiting us again, and she said what they used to do, they would grease the chicken. And we thought that was hilarious, because we would grease it and then they're downing. They don't have feathers when they're little. And the Rhode Island Reds were yellow, and these were yellow ones that we were greasing with just some old grease that we didn't use. And we would pull a little fuzz up in spots, and make them look funny on top of their heads and everything. And a chicken is funny. Sometimes he'll lose that fuzz and not grow feathers. And other times you'll have a little chicken that'll look just like a great big one. All her feathers are grown, and they're just pretty and cute as they can be. But some of them even get sunburned because the skin is so exposed. But we learned how to take care of the chickens.
Can you tell us about the pigs that had the cholera?
We had Duroc Jerseys. They are big red pigs. And that's what we had most all the time. And some of the neighbors had Poland Chinas. They're black pigs with a white belt around them. And they're different kinds, but ours were the Duroc Jerseys, red. And they would have little pigs in the spring. And I don't think there's any baby animal on the place that, I know what I didn't talk about, that is cuter than a little pig with these little curly tails. And the big old mama pig, she could nurse, a whole bunch of them, And one day, my dad came in, hog was sick, didn't know what was the matter with it. And all of his belly turned purple. My dad said, looks like cholera. Well, I don't know whether there weren't many veterinarians or whether we couldn't afford them or what. But he found some old black colored lady who said she had a remedy that would cure the hogs. And she came out with her jug of kind of black-looking stuff. I don't know what it was that she poured out of there. And she would put the pig and pry his mouth open and pour this stuff down him. Well, it didn't do any good. We lost 42 pigs that spring. And that's a lot. It was our meat for the winter, and we always figured on selling hogs. And of course, the folks were very upset about it, and Mother wrote to her sisters about it, and my little cousin, who was about the age of my youngest sister, about 7 years younger than I, heard them talking about Aunt Fanny's pigs all being sick. And that night when she said her prayer, she said, God bless Mother, and God bless our Daddy, and so on. And she says, and God bless Aunt Fanny's pigs. She was not a country child. She didn't know.
What was the thing you forgot?
Pardon?
What was the thing that you forgot?
The dogs and the cats.
Oh yeah, I talking about those.
Well, I'll tell you about our dogs. The first dog I can remember that we had, my grandpa gave us. He called him Happy. He was a little dog and was long-haired. The hair hung in his eyes. He had brown eyes. And he would go out in the pasture and around the farm, and he'd have burrs in him, and stickers, and all such things. And my dad said, that isn't the kind of a dog to have on a farm, because we couldn't keep him cleaned up. Well, I'm not right sure what happened to Happy, but he disappeared. Then my dad got a big collie dog, and his name was Pete. He was a beautiful dog, and something happened to Pete. I think he got distemper. The horses had distemper, and the dog got it too. And I think we had the veterinary for the horses, but I don't guess we did for Pete. Maybe his didn't show up right away. Anyway, he died. So my dad went back, and I think it was the same man where we got Bonnie that had these collie dogs. So he gave him another one, and that was Dan. And he was a pretty dog, and a smart dog, and good. And you could train him. He was good with the stock, and they'd always go with us when we went up to get the cows, and things like that. And Dan got his ear torn on a barbed wire fence, and it didn't seem to be bad, didn't amount to anything, but it got blown, my father called it, got flies on it, got maggots in it, and the poor dog scratched his head till he died. My mother was pretty PO'd. So then we got a female collie. She's the one that was 15/16 collie. Something went wrong somewhere. Anyway, she was a smart dog, and she was grown when we got her. These others were puppies, Pete and Dan. Collie was grown, but some people didn't want the female dogs, but we had her. Well, the result was, about once a year, she'd have puppies. We never had trouble getting rid of her puppies. People would speak for them ahead of time, before they were born. They'd want a puppy. And I guess I'll talk about the dog and the cat pose. We had Mama Kitty. I don't think she was a calico, but she was spotted. She might have been a calico. She was a good deal of white, but she had some kind of brownish spots on her too, so maybe she was. We didn't call her that. I don't know. We just called her Mama Kitty. And she had kittens most every spring. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3. Never too many. But Collie and Mama Kitty were pretty good friends. They got along fine. Neither one were permitted to come in the house. Naturally, the kittens and the puppies didn't either. But we kids just loved them. And the last year we were there, Mama Kitty had 5 kittens. Never had she had that many. She was always very good. We could play with them from the time they were born, when they still couldn't see. And one year, she had 3, and they were in the barn. Well, we were down there all the time playing with the kittens. And I think Mama Kitty thought that was enough. First thing we knew, we were watching out the window from the house. She was carrying them from the barn to our front tree. The big front tree, up high, about 8 or 10 feet up, had a hollow place in it. And she took those kittens up there in the tree where we couldn't get to them. My father says she doesn't want you to bother her babies. So she came up there till they were big enough to come down and play. Well, Mama Kitty was a good ratter. She'd kill rats as big as she was. And she was always dragging something home for the kittens. Sometimes it would be a bird, sometimes a rabbit. I've seen her with what my grandmother called sand streakers. They were sort of a little lizard, about 12 or 15 inches long. And she'd start eating on the head. And they'd wiggle back and forth, and she'd just keep right on eating. And it seemed to me they wiggled till she about had the whole thing down.
Yuck.
Yes. And of course she was caught feeling nice. She was good. We didn't have mice in the house or anything. But when she had those 5 kittens, that was almost more than she could handle. She was very thin, in spite of all the skim milk that she got. And my dad saw where he thinks she had got in a fight with a groundhog. And that was the end of Mama Kitty. Well, it left 5 little orphans at home. And Collie adopted those 5 kittens. And she would nurse with a puppy on one and then a cat on the other. And she'd lick the puppies' feet. She'd lick the kittens. She mothered them just as the same as the other. My father said that he wished he had a camera. People wouldn't believe how that dog mothered those little kittens and nursed them until they were able to milk themselves. We had one lady, the Brookmullers, said they wanted one of our pups. So we had one that looked like a little bear. We called him Cubby. And we kept him till he was old enough to take from his mother. They came down to get it. So they heard us call him Cubby. They said, "Is that his name?" We said, "Yes." They said, "We'll call him Cubby. We think that's a good name for him." But he did just look like a little bear cub, cute as he could be. But one time we were picking cherries at the orchard, which would be close to what would be a city block from the house, because we went from the house to the barn, and then across the garden in the creek, and then the orchard was back on it. Well, we heard Collie barking and barking and barking, and finally my dad says, "I think we'd better go see what's the matter with the dog." We got over there. There was a peddler who had a lot of tin pans and cooking utensils tied on his back. He was walking. Well, he was up a tree when my dad got there. Collie had got him up on the tree, and all he could say was, "Get the dog away," so he could get down. He gathered up his pans and went on down the road.
He didn't try to sell you?
No, he wasn't worrying about selling any. But Collie was a good watchdog. When we weren't there, she was. She never left the house, never followed anything, till the day we moved. And there was just she and 2 puppies left. And they were hauling the furniture down to Midland, which was a flag stop on the railroad. And they looked back. The last load of furniture went out. Here was Collie and the 2 pups following that last load of furniture down the road. My uncle stayed on the farm for a while after we were there. Oh, I forgot to tell you about the cat that got caught in the trap. She was a gray and white, spotted, pretty. In fact, she was so evenly marked, she looked like you had parted her hair and waved it the same in the front on both sides. She was a beautifully marked cat. And her body, mostly white, looked like she had kind of a gray blanket over her back. But we didn't see her for, about 3 days. And one evening, we heard this very faint meow out on the road. We went out to investigate, and here was our kitty cat. And her one leg was all raw, the fur had been torn off of it, and she was kind of dragging that foot. And come to find out, she had been caught in a trap that the neighbor had in his watermelon patch. Iron trap. And she may have chewed that leg to get out of there. I don't know what. But the skin was broken. Well, we brought her home, and my grandma was there again, thank goodness. And Grandma had some salve that cured everything. And we put her on a pillow, and we washed the leg off and put peroxide on it. And then Grandma put this salve on and wrapped it up. Well, fine. But when we wanted to take it off and redress it, it had dried on that fur. And we had to soak it and everything to get it loose. And that cat would watch her doing it. She seemed to know we were trying to help her. But if it hurt too bad, she'd reach over with her paw. She didn't scratch, but she just put her paw on top of Grandma's hand. That was enough, more. And, she lost 2 toes. But she got well, and she could walk. She really didn't limp much of anything. But we were a long time getting that cat fixed up. One time when it was so cold in the winter time, it was terribly cold out, we thought, well, why couldn't we let Collie and Mama Kitty in the house for the night? And they wouldn't come. You couldn't push them in or pull them in. They had been trained to stay outside, so we put them in the cellar. We had a little cellar that they dug out under the porch in the pantry, and every once in a while, young stock was put in there. We put young newborn calves in there one time because it was separate from our cellar under the house. But we had a lot of experiences with the dogs and the cats. But the cat left. My uncle thought the cat and the dog would be company for him. And he said he'd see her once in a while when he was up in the pasture. But she never came back to the house after we all left. I don't know where she went, maybe in the barn. The dog stayed for a while. I don't know what happened to him. It was awfully hard to leave all those pets.
It was a good time, though.
Oh, yes. Wouldn't take anything for it. Even my sister, who never liked the country, that she enjoyed the farm. Now, would you like to know some of my reaction as a city child going to the country?
Yeah.
Well, as I said, I was 7 years old. I had gone to kindergarten in St. Louis and had started in the first grade. And I went to the McKinley School in St. Louis, which is just across, not far from the approach to McKinley Bridge. You can see it. It's a good-sized school. And, of course, when we got on Grandpa's farm, I had to go to the rural school. And I had to walk 1.25 miles to school. And the first day I shall never forget. At home in St. Louis, I was only a couple of blocks away from school. I could go home for lunch, back, because I went all day to kindergarten. And out there I went all day to school, but we had to carry our lunch in a bucket to school. Well, that was funny to start with. And Mother hadn't gotten straightened out with the bread baking and what have you this morning. There was no bread to make a sandwich, so she gave me cold biscuits. Well, at our house, nobody ate cold biscuits. We gave them to the dogs and the cats. But I had biscuits with chunks of butter on it, and I don't remember what else. I expect jelly of some sort in that lunch bucket. And I didn't want anybody to see me eating those cold biscuits. So I found a corner in the schoolhouse, and I faced right into the corner with my bucket, and I'd take it out, take a bite, and put it back in the bucket while I chewed that bite. But I'm one of those kids. I don't know what the others had in their bucket, but I was sure it wasn't cold biscuits. And I remember the teacher had the class up. I don't know how many were in the class, nothing like I was used to at home. Because there was good, we were a whole room of first graders, you know. And she had words on the board. Well, it said cherries. I didn't know that word. Then it said red cherries, and then it said ripe cherries, and then it said red ripe cherries, and then it would say I see cherries, and so on and so forth. Well, because I didn't know it, they tittered, and I thought I was a dum-dum, and I thought so too. But afterwards I realized I knew yellow bird and a few other things, but I had a different reader than they had. But it took me many years before I realized I wasn't so dumb as they thought I was. But I felt terrible because I didn't know.
Are there any other things you remember about the city child going to the country?
Oh dear, yes. Um, the neighbors were very nice. The Woods lived, about a quarter of a mile from our place. When we were in our house, we couldn't see them, or their house, but we weren't that far. It was a right angle. The road made a right angle turn. And she had us over for dinner the first night. And they mentioned the cornfield. Well, I think I knew what a stalk of corn looked like because we had visited Mother's relatives in southern Illinois. But I guess I didn't know what a green corn looked like. I knew the corn stalk. So Maxine and I went out to the cornfield, and we came in with a lot of little black seeds. And we said we got them off the corn. We thought we had corn. It was morning glory seeds that they had twined around the Woods all had a good laugh at us for being so dumb that we didn't know what corns looked like. Oh, a lot of things were different and funny at school and everywhere. But we learned, but we're always fascinated with the animals. And my father took good care of the animals. He would almost get up and leave the dinner table if it were time to milk the cow. And the horses were bedded down in fresh straw every night. And we thought it was great fun to pump water for the horses or to feed the others. Well, one job we had was to carry the wood in. The wood box was on the back porch, and that meant it stayed dry. And the wood pile was about halfway between the house and the barn. I can't remember minding to carry the wood. I mean, that was our chore, what we did, was to bring the wood in. But I hate bugs. And I learned to take the first piece of wood and hold it upright in the arm. Then you can lay the others across your arm. You can carry a pretty good sized load. It seemed like invariably I'd get about halfway to the house and out would come a spider or something. I'd drop the whole thing, have to pick it up again to get the wood in. And we gathered the eggs every night. We brought the cows down from the pasture. And in the summertime we pumped water for them. And the mailbox was about a half a mile from the house. And to go there we had to cross Mud Creek with a stone bridge, and the bridge was covered with vines, ivy mostly, and it was infested with rattlesnakes. We went right down the center of the road, and my sister did anyway because she was allergic to that poison ivy. And there were 3 mailboxes there, ours and Woods's, and then Osdale lived about closer to the Woods than we did, a little bit further down the road. So we had 3 mailboxes at the corner where the road turned, and whoever went first would bring all the mail that far and then put it in the mailboxes. So we'd do that, always with a stick. We never went to the mailbox or up in the pasture without carrying a stick. We did learn to go up to the pasture and play. And we would sometimes take our lunch with us. And people didn't worry about their kids in those days. We could go up in the pasture and play. Some of the fence around the pasture was stone fence. There you better watch the snakes. We would pick leaves, big leaves, maybe wild grape leaves or something like that, and stick them together with little bits of twigs and make ourselves hats and aprons. We'd mark off on the ground a playhouse. This is my house. Maxine would have hers over here, and we'd have the different rooms and playhouse. I have drunk water. Maybe I shouldn't tell that. didn't hurt us. We had a lot of wild fruit on the place. We picked blackberries, gooseberries, wild plum, elderberries, wild strawberries, all of those things. Our schoolhouse had a furnace downstairs and one big register upstairs. And that was very unusual. We thought our school was pretty progressive to what some of the neighbor schools were. We had 8 months schools, and most of the neighboring schools were 7-month schools. And we had a furnace instead of a stove. We had a big yard with big trees. The name was Sunnyside. They named it that because when the schoolhouse was built, there weren't any trees.
And so you went back to St. Louis on a train?
Yes. Furniture went back on the train. We had left our living room furniture at Grandpa's. They used it in their house because we had there were only 4 rooms in our house, and then a large pantry and a closed-in porch. So we ate in the kitchen, had a large kitchen, and then the other room was our, more or less, dining room. I think the dining table was in there. I know the buffet was. China cabinet, it wasn't a buffet, it was a china cabinet. And a piano, and so on. Then the 2 bedrooms were upstairs. And when my grandma came, I'd always have to share a room with her. And
who played the piano?
Mother. And she gave lessons to some of the neighbor kids. But they always thought it wasn't a good idea for her to try to teach us. And I wish that she had, because after we moved back to Illinois and I was in high school, she sat down at the piano one day, and I don't think we were there an hour. And she showed me how to change from the key of C to the key of G, and the scales and different things. G had a F sharp and C no sharps or flats and so on. And I was extremely interested in it, and no one had ever approached music to me that way. I had learned every good boy does fine, F-A-C-E, and I didn't really learn. I figured out every note until I knew what it was. I always felt it was a disappointment to my mother because she was exceptionally good piano and taught piano. And I think if she had taught me, I would have done better. Are we on or are we not? Oh, we are. Well, I was 14 in March before we left. And I was old enough to begin a little bit of social life. Now the children probably won't enjoy it till they're older. But the first party I went to was a taffy pull. And the mother made taffy, and then we all greased our hands and pulled taffy. Of course the boys put it on our backs and in our hair and such things. But that was one. And another time I was invited, there were 4 of us, 2 boys and 2 girls. The mother of one of the boys, she just had the one child, had a croquet party. So he was a cousin to my girlfriend in school. So she invited the girlfriend, cousin, and me, and another boy. Well, of course, the cousin didn't want to go with her cousin. She got the other boy, and I got this dummy cousin. We played partners in croquet. That was one of my first experiences.
You went back to the city.
We went back to the city. Okay.